Hey everybody, it's me, typical dude 42 here, and this is going to be the first episode of a little series I always wanted to do, where I talk about things, since talking about things is my favorite thing to do as a matter of fact. But this video is going to be my honest thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's, the ever iconic indie horror game franchise, so let's get into it. Everyone who has a functioning computer, a smartphone, or heaven forbid, is always skating through those demonic realms that are social media platforms should know what Five Nights at Freddy's is. Check cameras, manage resources, and don't get your ears blasted by a mechanical furry popping up in your face. Perfect, pretty much the perfect game for Let's Players, autistic kids with too much free time, I was one of them, and people who enjoy overanalyzing every single pixel on a screen to try figuring out the story that might not ever be solved. Regardless of this being a moderately frightening game series, I always weirdly found comfort in it, and as a mind melter game like Pac-Man, it lets you in the same space with the same enemies over and over again, but with different patterns and different scenarios in every game that makes no playthrough truly the same. That being said, I've got a lot to talk about when it comes to Five Nights at Freddy's, and plenty I don't want to talk about. I'm not going to be talking about the absolute gobbledygook of a storyline, especially with how it has ended to utter gadzookery lately, and I'm only going to be talking about the first four games because they're the core of the franchise. I might do a part 2 video eventually where I discuss the non-game stuff, like the books or the movie, but then again, it's a might situation, so don't be expecting it anytime soon. But, that's it. The first Five Nights at Freddy's is no questions the most iconic entry, and is also the entry that's the most simple and tight. Since Scott originally intended Five Nights at Freddy's to be a standalone game, you get that feeling all throughout. The lore, at this point, is just there to justify why this game is happening, and come to think of it, I can't really see there being any loose ends as hot of a take that is. I feel this way similarly with the Halloween sequels, in that the first movie was so tight and so self-contained with so much ambiguity, and that you didn't really need any sequels. While I do say everything deserves sequels, it's never a need, and that is exactly how I felt about Five Nights at Freddy's. Gameplay-wise, the first Five Nights at Freddy's is the best structured for me. Going back to my Pac-Man comparison, it's in that similar format where you're in a closed space in which each of the four enemies with their own patterns you have to outsmart. But unlike Pac-Man, you can't move or fight back. You're trapped in the center of the map having to manage your resources and react at the right time. The only issue with having to react well is the unpredictable behavior of the animatronics. For example, Bonnie may fully charge straight into your office, while Chica may lurk at the corner for a while before catching you off guard. There's no true AI with these games' animatronics, but with all the different variable timers for how the patterns behave, it does create an illusion that these are learning intelligent monsters, and that adds quite a lot to the tension. I'll say though that I still find this game really scary, mainly for the aforementioned unpredictability factor, and because I'll admit that I'm weak to jump scares. Very, very, very weak. Should be no surprise that out of all the other games, this is the one I have the most hours on Steam, and it's the one I always come back to whenever I feel like it. No matter what, I always try to go through all 5 nights in a single sitting since it's not that long of a play session, though I don't really want to do the 6th night or the custom night much unless I really want to. Moving on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2, which, boy, I've got a lot to say on this one. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is a love it or hate it game for many, but for me, it's not a great game, nor is it a bad game. It's just an alright game. I really like all the variety there is compared to the other games, and there's so many animatronics in so little time on such a little map. There's mystique to it, really. But the primary reason this game divides so many people is that the later nights practically rely on strokes of luck. The game's RNG is the source of many memes and frustrated gamers for a reason, as even when you play well, there's a high chance on later nights that a scenario will occur that cannot be won. But I will say my biggest issue with Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is the horror, or lack thereof. You see, I like the toy animatronics a lot. I love their designs, they're pretty cuddly looking, but that's the issue. I cannot find myself feeling the slightest bit fear from them whatsoever. They're too clean, glossy, and cartoony compared to the grimy, realistic, and ugly animatronics from the first game. While the puppet is still quite terrifying, I really can't say the same for the others as it really dilutes the horror. Due to the frantic nature of the game, the atmosphere feels diluted from the first since you're focused on dealing with this myriad of threats. You never feel quite engrossed in the atmosphere, which makes it far less frightening. I do like to sum up Five Nights at Freddy's 2 with this little sentence. The game is like Chicken McNuggets from McDonald's. It's cheap, quick to eat, and if you eat too much, you'll get a stomach ache. It's just nice to have every once in a while. But now let's move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 3. I dare say that Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is a huge improvement from the second game. While it may lack in variety, it makes up for it in tightness. A lot of people dog on this game for having only one threat that can harm you, but I love that idea. It goes from feeling like an invasion to a game of cat and mouse with an adaptive threat. Springtrap is quite an effective antagonist, and even when you try to keep him boxed in with the audio lure, you still have to deal with the systems failing and the hallucinations that could give you away, and it seems like he doesn't have a truly fixed movement pattern since he's always zigzagging around the map to find you. To this day, at times, I still cannot find out what his pattern is and where he goes next. In fact, you could barely see him on the cameras for the most of the time, making it really terrifying trying to figure out where he is and when he might get you. I cannot say I have too much to say against Five Nights at Freddy's 3, since it's such a tight and well-paced game. Sure, it doesn't have that iconic resource management induced dread the first game has, but that's fine. It's not trying to be like the first game, nor is it trying to be like the second game. Although I cannot say too much against FNAF 3, there's one major complaint I have, and it's the excessive green tint throughout the game. I tend to take issue with color palettes this limited in video games, and I know it's trying to make everything look scary, but it ends up coming off like I'm looking through the whole world like I'm wearing pickle jars for glasses. It's really, really, really giving me Fallout 3 flashbacks. Coincidentally, both Fallout 3 and Five Nights at Freddy's 3 are games with an F in the title and are the third entries that have a heavy, heavy green tint. Just a little something I wanted to point out. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 being the last one I'm going to talk about is the Five Nights at Freddy's game I come to when I'm tired of the first or the third. And what really pulls me into this game is the horror elements. It is arguably the scariest entry of the original four games, as you have no camera to aid you as you're forced to listen for the animatronics and end up getting your ears blasted with one wrong flashlight click. One critique I see for Five Nights at Freddy's 4 that often pops up is that the Nightmare animatronic designs try too hard to be scary. I really cannot bring myself to hate the Nightmare animatronic designs. They're one of my personal favorites along with the Phantom animatronics from the third game, since they represent the side in Five Nights at Freddy's I really like. It's the side that's mythical, mysterious, and monstrous. Don't get me wrong, the mascot designs are still effective, but these things, they're just frickin' cool. Another thing I like about Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is that it feels like a souped up version of the first game while still carving out its own identity. You still have that similar Pac-Man formula, only even more difficult and completely mutated. How I would rank the games best to worst, it would be the first game, the fourth game, the third game, and the second game. This is my honest ranking. I don't know how many people will agree with it, but if you have a different ranking, let me know in the comments below. Looking back, I'm actually shook how tight the early Five Nights at Freddy's games were designed. even with the awkward middle child that's the second one. And I feel that there's much comfort to be had with these games regardless of them being horror games. Like I mentioned with the Pac-Man comparison, that blend of repetition and unpredictability is absolutely tantalizing. That makes these games such a good pick up and play type game, and I really, really like that. That's something I really like about the early Five Nights at Freddy's games. They're not trying to be fully lore delivery machines, they're trying to be, well, video games. The kind of games I tend to enjoy the most. The games you can pick up and play for a quick period of time and put them down and just think about how much of a blast you had and always wonder what's it going to be like the next time I try to play it. Is a kind of design I want to see more in not just horror games, but in indie games as a whole. It's not that I don't like story driven indie games, it's just I value pick up and play arcade game design far more than something I am into for an hour before taking a break for a day, or a month at that. And putting all this to bed, those were my honest thoughts on Five Nights at Freddy's. Keep in mind, these are my personal opinions that I kept as level headed and casual as possible, and I'm actually quite curious what your opinions on my takes are, or what your own takes on these games are. That being said, that is it for today's video. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and goodbye!